Okay everyone, so now we have the Cake Shop program, and in this video I'd like to just get some basic functions up and running. Notice first that I do have the data set up and some bound controls from the data set on the form here. And also notice, this is significant, that I have deleted what we call the binding navigator. That's that little navigation bar up at the top that you get automatically. I told you in class that I don't like it, and I want you to be coding your own buttons, which is what we're going to do in this application. So you can just click on that thing, the binding navigator, and hit the delete key on the keyboard to get rid of that. And so we have just regular old-fashioned buttons here on the form that we'll code by hand, each of them. And so anyway, we have our bound controls, and I just want to remind you of this binding source object in the component tray, because this becomes somewhat significant in this program. Recall that the binding source really is responsible for maintaining the connections between your bound controls, or these text boxes, and the columns in the data set. And so, not only that, but the binding source has several very useful properties and methods that we're going to be using in this application. So I would like to just get these buttons out of the way. For example, the navigation buttons, back and next, and move first and move last. These are really easy. They're just one line apiece. So for example, if I double click the move first button, we can, I already have the code here to save some time, but we can call upon the binding source, cake binding source, and he has move first, move last, move previous, and so on. So basically these four methods are all you need for navigation. You see them there, and so we're using them there for the first, the back, next, and last. Okay, so that'll work, and I'll just test those real quickly. Okay, so we're going, what the heck was that? Seems like quite a jump there. Okay, I guess we're, oh, you know what, I think I might have the wrong one here with the move next. I'll just check on that real quick. So move first, move next, yeah, move next should be move next, not last, move next, and then not last. Okay, all right, anyway, so there's that. And let's take care of the picture as well. This is something that you have already done at this point, but we're going to do things slightly differently in this application, and I want to introduce a new type of object called the data row view. So let me create a reference to a data row view up at the top here at the class level, notice, and I'm going to call this current cake. And I want you to think of a data row view as a tiny, like horizontally shaped window. This is the data table in the database. And so you can imagine that, you know, the data set is like a virtual database. So the data set you can imagine is looking like this. But I want you to imagine a data row view as just a tiny, long, like horizontal window to just look at one record. Think of the name, data row view. So we're just like viewing that one record, okay? So think of it as like a little window like that. Okay, so anyway, that's a data row view. And basically, every time the user lands on a new record, we want to view a new data row. Okay, so we're going to change the data row view value to the currently viewed record, which, by the way, can be accessed through the binding source. So, and recall that, like when you were doing your picture in like your previous assignment or last week, you double-click the binding source to modify that current changed event. Every time the user lands on a new record, this event fires. So let me paste the code into here, and we'll talk about it. Hang on here, sorry. Okay. So this current cake is the data row view that we created up at the reference to the data row view that's created up at the top, way up at the top at the class level. And you would set that to the binding source current property. Okay, so the binding source is keeping track of the current record, and whatever is the current record, we're going to assign that to our little data row view window type of object. Now the thing is, what we get back from this property is a plain, like, generic object type, so that's why we have to cast that to a data row view. Now, I put a big note here in all caps not to forget this line in your homework. It's easy to forget, but it's absolutely vital to have the program working properly. So now we're pretty much home free. I do want to point out a couple of things. I've got, like, this, our last exercise where we were doing pictures, you probably just had this one if statement here, just one if statement to just to make sure that there's actually a picture name in the database in the column, because if you try to create an image from a null picture, then you would get, like, probably a file not found exception or something like that. So there's that. But now, because we are doing a parameter query, which I'll do in the next video, we're at a point where, like, when you're doing a parameter query, it necessitates like kind of emptying the data set and refilling it with the records that only meet the criteria that you specify in your parameter query. So there are these moments when your data set is empty and this event is firing. So if you don't account for a null being the current cake, which is going to happen as you're emptying the data set and refilling it. You're going to have these moments where there's nothing in there and this event is firing. Then you're going to throw an exception at that point. So that's why I have, like, an if inside of an if. It's almost like we have two layers of certainty before we go ahead and make the picture. So that's what that's about. Maybe I'll mention it again in the next video, but in the next video I'm going to do the parameter query. Maybe I'll take it out in the next video and you can watch the program bomb. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and hopefully we're seeing the cakes. There they are. Okay, so next video I'll set up the parameter query.